welcome back to the Highlands Podcast. We're changing our format for this season. We're going to a weekly format as we look at some key verses in our study through the book of Philippians. We're going through a sermon series of the same title, This is from God. And also we are going through a book called This is from God, a devotional that I wrote through going verse by verse through the book of Philippians. We're spending this whole 13 weeks looking at what God is teaching us and wants to share with us through this book of Philippians that was written by the Apostle Paul from prison. And so we're looking at key verses that maybe we weren't able to talk about or we had to cut from our sermon on Sunday. In fact, this sermon passage, Philippians chapter 2, verses 1 through 4, my wife, my favorite speaker, Pastor Amy, actually brought an incredible message. And she had a different take on something, this passage. And I want to bring one verse to you that we didn't talk about, she didn't talk about in the message. And that's Philippians chapter 2, verse 2. Paul writes, and I love what he says in verse 2. He says, "Make my joy complete." I love that phrase, make my joy complete. Paul's talking about that he wants to have an abundant life, a fulfilling life. And by the way, you and I should want that as well. Sometimes we have this mentality that Jesus came to save us and we're going to have a great time in heaven, but life is going to suck until we get there. But I don't believe that's why Jesus came. In fact, Jesus teaches in John 10, verse 10, "I've come that they might have life and have it more abundantly." Because the enemy tries to steal, kill, and destroy, but Jesus came that we would have life and life to the full. And Paul is reiterating that where he's saying, I want my joy, my life, to be complete. I want to have everything that God is offering. And I want that for my life, and I want that for your life as well. But what does it mean to live this joyful, complete life? We're not called to misery. We're not called to live this life that, nobody would want. Like sometimes it's like Christians are some of the most miserable people on earth. And it's like, well, why would an unsaved person want what you have? Because it doesn't seem very appealing. But that's not the Christian life that God's called us to. He's called us to a complete life. But what's interesting about this passage in Philippians chapter 2 is Paul is not talking about things completing his life. He's not talking about a possession or a toy or a promotion or a title. He's actually referring to people in verses 1 and 2. He's talking about this idea that when we're thinking the same things, when we're moving in the same direction, when we are united in spirit, when we have loving the things that Jesus loves, when we're together in community with one purpose, that is what makes our life complete. That is what makes our joy complete. That's a big difference. Because we get sucked so much into this consumer culture that if we just had one more thing, if we had just one more toy, one more possession, that would make us complete. All right, podcast listeners, viewers, I am never publicly share this, and you are going to judge me. I hope not. But I'm opening myself up to your judgment because there's something that I do that is a little bit nerdy. Like, I can be nerdy sometimes, and it's not like I don't really like Star Wars. I haven't seen all the movies. Don't judge me again. Man, I'm really walking into some dangerous ground right now. I haven't seen all 200 Star Wars movies, so I'm sorry I haven't done that. I'm not into Lord of the Rings. I haven't seen all those movies or read all the books. I'm not into all the fantasy stuff, but there's one area that I can nerd out over, and it started when I was a kid. You want to know what it is? Baseball cards. When I was a kid, my dad would take me to card shows or card shops. In fact, growing up in Lake LA, we actually had a card shop out in Lake LA that my mom would take me to, my dad would take me to. We'd go there probably once a week or so. And baseball cards were pretty inexpensive back in the day. And my parents would let me pick out a pack of cards. And I would go open them up and I would collect them. And I did that for a few years growing up until I discovered girls. And then I was like, what am I doing with baseball cards? These girls are looking great. Like, let me pursue a girlfriend, and I ditched the cards. But about a year ago, I was at my parents' house, and we were talking about stuff, and baseball cards came up, and I found a trunk of old baseball cards that I collected when I was young. Now, there is, and just if you hate this, just skip ahead if you want, but I'm going to nerd out for just a moment just to illustrate what Paul's talking about completing our joy complete. Because there was a baseball card that I desperately wanted when I was about 9 years old, and it was a rookie card of a baseball player named Ken Griffey Jr. In fact, it was, just for all my baseball card collector friends out there, it was a 1989 Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. rookie card, a pretty famous, popular card, and it was a card that I wanted. I could never find it. I couldn't get it. And then it just got crazy, and I forgot about it for about 30 years. Well, last year, as I was looking at some cards and kind of looking back into the hobby and looking through all the cards that I had, I was like, you know what I want? I want to get a 89 Griffey Jr. rookie card. And so there happened to be a card show nearby in Pasadena. And so last year I got my family. I got them tickets into this card show. I sent them a picture of this card, and I put my wife and my 2 daughters on the hunt for this card. I'm like, this is the card that we're going to get. I'm looking for it. I've been wanting this since I was like 9 years old. We're going to find this card. And I'm happy to say that I found the card in my hand. By the way, for my card collectors, this is an 8, which is pretty good, but this is the card, an 89 Griffey Jr. rookie card. But here's what I thought about this card. I thought that this card would make me feel complete when it came to baseball cards. I thought that this card would bring me joy, and it does. I love this card. It reminds me of my childhood. It reminds me of just growing up. It's nostalgia for sure for this. But here's what I also found out. There were other cards that I also wanted to find. There was a Bo Jackson card. There was a Frank Thomas card. There was a Chipper Jones card. There was all things that I was like, man, what about this card? And what about this card? And here's what I found. I found that there's not a baseball card that will make my life complete. And I want you to know, even this is a smaller level, but there might be other things in your life that you're like, man, if I could just have that. Maybe you're single. If I could just be married, that would make my life complete. Maybe you're married. If I could be single, that would make my life complete. Maybe you're like, if my kids would just graduate and leave and I'm an empty nester, my life would be complete. Or maybe the reverse. If I would just have a child, my life would be complete. I'm here to tell you that there are some things in our life that will not make us complete other than the person of Jesus. And what Paul is reminding us, he's saying, hey, I want my joy to be complete. I want my life to be complete by living in community with Jesus followers. And so let me encourage you today, if you're pursuing a possession, if you're pursuing another rental home or vacation property, if you're pursuing another toy, and if you're grinding and if you're trying to pursue these wants over needs and you're just like, I need this, one more thing, I want you to know it's not going to end well. It's not going to last. It's not going to bring you the joy because Jesus is the one that makes you complete and he brings you joy through other people. And so let me encourage you. If you're praying for a spouse, I'll pray with you. Like we want God to bless you if that's your heart's desire. But I want you to know that husband or that wife is not going to be Jesus to you. Mom and dad, you're praying for a child. I want to pray that with you. I want God to bless you with a child, with another child or a first child. But I want you also to know that find your joy in Jesus first. Because what happens is we put what Jesus should be shouldering on our spouse or on a child, and it weighs them down to the point where we're trying to find our joy completed in them, and they were never meant to carry that burden for you. And so I want to encourage you, let me ask you this question. Who brings you joy? Who brings you joy? Maybe think about somebody who God's brought in your life that you kind of had taken for granted. Perhaps it's a parent. Maybe it's a pastor or spiritual leader. Maybe it's a former coach that you're like, man, they just poured into me. Maybe it's just somebody that God's brought your way at church or in your job. Who brings you joy? But here's the thing. We don't just look for people to bring joy to us. God's called us to also bring joy to other people. And so who can you bring joy to? You see, the Christian life is not about receiving. It's actually about giving. In fact, Jesus tells us in Acts 20, he says, it is more blessed to give than to receive. Because if you've ever been generous with your resources, maybe your finances or your time or your talents, you know that when you go serve somebody, you are far more blessed by doing that than they are by your gifts. I took a trip to Africa this past summer where I had the privilege of going with some pastors in our church, and we were training up some pastors. And the whole idea was that we would host these conferences and that we would pray and teach and encourage them in ministry. But I will tell you, I had all these courses lined up and lessons I was teaching and Bible verses I was sharing with the pastors, but I received far more from them than I believe they received from me. In fact, on my very last day that I was there before I was coming back home, one of the pastors got up and they spoke and it was translated, and essentially what he was saying was, Pastor Jeremy, we want to pray over you. Would that be okay? And these pastors, I'll never forget, gathered around me and they prayed over me in their own language. And I didn't understand all that they were saying, but the heart was there. I could feel what they were saying in the Spirit of God. It was just telling me that they were encouraging me. And I'll tell you, they gave me far more than I gave them. It is more blessed to give than to receive. And I want you to know that when your joy is complete, it's not because you got another baseball card or collectible or toy. It's because you are giving out and you are living out in a way that is encouraging other people around you. So who can you bring joy to? And I love this thought from Paul. Jesus is going to make our joy complete by living in community with others. Well, I'm so glad that you joined us for week 4 of our Highlands podcast. Thank you for coming along this Philippians ride with us as we're looking at things that are from God. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast as well as our sermon podcast. And if you haven't already, check out that book. This is from God, a devotional going verse by verse through the book of Philippians. We've got several more weeks ahead as we look at key verses that from the Apostle Paul in the book of Philippians that I can't wait to unpack with you. I can't wait to see you next week. God bless. Hope you have a great week.